the next presentation we have. So, for our next speaker, she is a petite but risky woman. She did competitive rock climbing in college, and she is an adrenaline junkie as she works in the ER. And she had a pet squirrel that had epilepsy. So please welcome Dr. Peggy Hale.
I'm up here, I promise. You're welcome to stand in the back if you want it. All right, Julie, thank you for having me tonight, guys. Thanks for coming. I'm very honored and humbled, actually, to be here and speak before you. Like Julie said, I'm a physician. I've been a doctor for a little over 10 years. I'm board certified in emergency medicine. I love adrenaline. ER is definitely the place for me. I want to share with you how I got there. But it requires kind of going back a little way, so bear with me just for a few minutes. I want to share my story with you. So I was born into a rural middle-class family. My mom really kind of influenced the way my life was shaped. My earliest memory, I remember I was 4 years old, hiding under my bed, and watching my mom walk back and forth, dragging the belt, back and forth. I knew that the longer I was there, the worse I was going to get it, but I was too terrified to come out. During the week, it was pretty tough. The weekends were a little bit easier. Sunday morning, we wouldn't get beat, but we would get cursed out on the way to church, be forced to dry our tears, and go in and meet Jesus in the happy place called church. I learned to compartmentalize very early. Jesus never came home with us. Jesus just lived behind the four walls on Sunday morning. The interaction I had with my dad was there. He was working on his PhD during our elementary years. So he studied, he worked, and I would beg him to put me up for adoption or to send me to foster care. I'd beg to be put with family in another state. But his only advice to me was, when you get old enough, you can fight her back. It didn't seem like there was any reprieve. During the summer, when I was 12 years old, my mom was very social. She loved her friends. She loved going out. She loved being popular and having the greatest clothes and driving fancy cars. So she thought it would be a good idea to go shopping with all of her girlfriends every Tuesday and allow her friend's son to babysit me, who was 16. The very first time they left is whenever I had my first alcoholic drink, and I was raped. I didn't even know what rape was. I didn't even know what sex was at that time. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was something scary. When my mom came back that day, I begged her to take me to the doctor. I told her something was wrong and I couldn't explain it. I was afraid to tell her, afraid that I would get beat. I didn't know if this was my fault or somebody else's fault. But I knew I needed to go somewhere safe. I wasn't allowed to go to the emergency room unless I told her what was wrong, and so we ended up going home that day, and that same story continued all summer. You know, life can be tough when you don't know where to go or who to turn to. I didn't know Jesus was there at my house. I knew he was behind the walls on Sunday morning. I didn't know how to get there, and I didn't know how to bring him or to meet me where I was. So like I said, we grew up rurally. We are in the country. We lived probably 20-25 minutes from my high school. My mom didn't want to waste time with her kids, taking them places or spending money on them, but she didn't really want us home either. So her idea was a good idea to let us date. So at 14, I was allowed to date because it would mean us getting out of the house and she wouldn't have to spend money on us. 14 unchaperoned? That's ridiculous. So I very quickly learned to anesthetize myself through dating and through men. Obviously, the more money they had, the more fun things you could do. It was a great escape. I also found out that I was allowed to do school activities because, again, it didn't cost any money and it would keep us out of the house. So I ran cross country, winter track, anything that would keep me busy. That was awesome. But another tool that abusers use and that my mom used is they like to isolate you. So I was grounded from everything except for school sports and dating. And it's really hard to make lasting friendships whenever you only see people at school or on the team. So high school came and went. I went to college. I went to 2 different colleges. I transferred halfway through. I ended up graduating from Liberty University in Virginia. I ran cross country for them as a walk-on. And so between studying, running, working, and dating, that was kind of all I knew. I graduated and kind of got lost. I didn't know what came next. I knew I wanted to do medicine, but I had gotten so lost in the meantime that I decided I was just gonna move home. Then I found out I was homeless. My parents had divorced. My mom claimed squatters' rights and grabbed everything in the house and said no one could come back. My dad was living with a family friend in one of their spare bedrooms, and there was just no room. So the easy thing to do was just to move in with a boyfriend at the time. This wasn't my plan. He wasn't, long-term material, so it was just always looking for the next great thing. So when that relationship turned sour, I moved in with a local businessman, and we'd go up and down the East Coast, we'd go to Canada, we do all kinds of fun things. We met on the mountain bike circuit whenever we were racing, and life seemed really great. And within a year or so, he proposed, and I don't know if you've ever heard God talk to you, but I clearly heard God say, no, run, this is bad. And I was like, God, you haven't showed up. If you're real, I'm gonna marry him and you make it work. Bad idea. So, Jeremiah 17 says the heart is deceitfully wicked, deliberately knowing that this was not God's plan for my life. I went ahead and got married. And, the second part of that verse that says, the heart is deceitfully wicked, who can know it? It goes on to say that God is gonna let you bear the fruit of basically your decisions. So that, through a series of unfortunate events, I found out that everything I thought I was marrying into, and that was so awesome and gonna rescue me from life, was totally false. It was like an Oprah show. The diplomas on the wall were all forgeries. The frat boys that he had in his phone were all made up. The houses that we stayed at were not his, and that's a whole nother legal issue. And all of his businesses were in bankruptcy, and he had used my credit cards to ruin my credit. He was gone for 6 months at a time, but I prayed on my knees so hard that God would rescue our marriage, that he would save us, and God was silent. My God, typical. You didn't show up then, you didn't show up now, where are you? And that relationship lasted about 4 years. He had filed for divorce, and I would never sign the paperwork because I knew God was gonna rescue me. Eventually I ended up in the hospital in the ER with broken bones and decided to sign the paperwork. It was one of the hardest things I ever did because I felt like a failure. But I also saw that this was the consequences of my bad decisions. It doesn't justify anything that happened during those 4 years, but I definitely could see where I was at fault. So I took the MCAT. I applied to medical schools all across the country. I went on my first 3 interviews. I got accepted at all of them, and I went to Arizona because it was the furthest away. I didn't have the money, obviously, applying for med school, and traveling to interviews is really expensive. So I changed my name, which was really cool, and had a new start in Arizona. Nobody knew where I came from. Nobody knew my past. Nobody knew anything. I was a new person. And, I wasn't going to use men anymore. I was going to be independent. I was going to be on my own. All that stuff. And then comes Romans 7. Whenever Paul says the things I don't want to do, I do, and the things I don't want to do, I do the things I don't, all that stuff. I was so confused, and old habits die hard. And within 6 months, I was dating the DA of Phoenix and flying out to LA on the weekend and dating an Olympic decathlete and a Calvin Klein underwear model. And life is so hard. So that was super awesome in a way, but Hollywood life is something that I was so not prepared for. The glitz and the glamour and the Hollywood parties are awesome, but they were so empty at the same time. After a couple months, LA was definitely where my heart was. I had this tremendous offer that almost sounds like something from a reality TV show. So this guy said, he likes me. He doesn't really want to get married, but wants to make this a committed thing. And in his mind, the commitment was he was going to pay for my med school, which private med school at the time is $45 a year, and that's all student loans, not including room, board, books. He wanted to get me a trainer so I could get in even better shape. He wanted to get me a stylist so my clothes would match his clothes, so whenever we went to these parties, we would match their clothes. Have my jewelry to match, upgrade my car because my Ford Taurus wasn't appropriate. We'd have to leave that at the airport. And, all these things that was like, wow, money, 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 fancy cars, nice clothes, big parties. Like, we're invited to fancy movie stars' houses and things, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. But then the very last thing that he wanted to change about me was he wanted me to meet with his psychiatrist to get these Jesus notions out of my head. And I think he wanted me to sleep with them. But so I was like, wow, this is great. I went back to Arizona, and it hit me. I was like, do I want the world without Jesus, or do I want Jesus without the world? And it was so hard that night. And Jesus and I kind of got real. And I'm like, Jesus, where were you? Where were you all my life? Where were you when I was 4? Where were you when I was 10, when I was 12? Why didn't you stop? Why couldn't you rescue me? Why? Where were you? Why didn't you save my marriage? Why? And, the second time I heard God talk, the first time was stop and run, and this one was, I've loved you with an everlasting love. And I was there. I stopped the hand, that could have harmed you more. You are here. You are a survivor. It wasn't me running from you. It was you running from me. I was there. Where were you? And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was kind of, a reckoning point. What do I choose? So that night on my hands and knees, tears flowing down my face, I finally surrendered. And I said, Jesus, it's yours, all of it. I felt like I was losing the world, but that's exactly what I needed to do in order to gain Jesus. And, through all these experiences, I feel like God has made me a broken person, and that's right where we need to be, because if I wasn't broken, then I wouldn't need Jesus. And by being broken and going through different experiences in life, it gives us compassion. And this kind of ties directly into the medical field and how I chose emergency medicine, because the emergency room is full of broken people. I can hold somebody's hand who has been assaulted and say, I know it hurts. I know you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, you don't know what tomorrow's gonna look like, you don't wanna tell people. I can hold the hand of somebody that, has been abused and scared and doesn't wanna leave. I see it in their eyes. They're scared. They're not ready to make that commitment yet because they don't know, they don't know what else is out there, and they don't know that life can be better. I give them my phone number. I give them my cell phone. I'm like, call me when you're ready. It's easy to judge people in those situations and say, just walk away, just get out. But it's different to walk in their shoes and know the terror and the hurt that they're experiencing. I can hold the hand of somebody that is having a miscarriage. It's hard. This is a little medically, but when people are bleeding and cramping in their first 6 weeks, it's too early to see on an ultrasound if there's a baby or not. We don't know if the pregnancy is healthy. What we can do is rerun their blood work. It's a waiting game for 48 hours until we retest to know if those numbers are going up or down. It's when we're weak is when Jesus helps us be strong. 2 Corinthians, says that we need him, and it's because of our weaknesses that we can show God's glory and God's strength. I would love it if people could just see from medical school on, if I have to be vulnerable, if, God didn't call me to share what's been in my past, but that's not who I am, and it's only because of those things that I can have compassion and meet people where they are. I try to not talk about my past and the fact that I changed my name and everything, but by denying my past, I was actually denying God's grace and mercy that brought me to where I am today. How sad that must make him and break his heart that I'm ashamed of his grace and mercy and his love for me. So God's actually redeeming my story while I'm showing compassion and helping to redeem the medical field. Medical field's lost a lot of the compassion. I think that's part of its brokenness. We rely on facts and research and medications and surgeries. I can make you better with this or that, but we're missing the healing touch of Jesus. If you look at Jesus' life, he has 31 healings in the New Testament, and it is so cool because Jesus wasn't just a dermatologist. He wasn't just an ophthalmologist. If you look at his miracles, he healed the blind man. He knew ophthalmology. He healed the leper. He knew infectious disease, internal medicine, dermatology. He healed the withered hand. He knew neurology. He healed the paralyzed. He knew neurology, neurosurgery, occupational therapy, physical therapy. He healed the mute. He knew speech therapy. He healed the epileptic. He knew neurology. He healed the epileptic that fell into the fire. He knew neurology and reconstructive burn surgery. He healed the woman with bleeding disorders. He knew internal medicine, hematology, oncology, and that's just assuming that the things that he healed were simple things that we could even heal today. If a person today were to go through all those different specialties, residencies, and fellowship, they would be in training for over 60 years, and they still wouldn't be able to bring someone back from the dead. How cool is that, right? So, by showing compassion to your patients and by taking the time to pray with them, they're going to see Jesus in you. Without even telling them about Jesus, they're going to be able to actually see your heart for them, and your nurses are going to catch on, the people around you are going to catch on, your staff, they're going to know. So, a couple different things. Once people know you're a Christian, you're automatically held to a higher standard. They are going to pay extra attention to how you talk, how you walk, what you say. Are you criticizing those patients? So whenever a patient comes in and they tell you what's wrong, it's called their chief complaint. What a negative connotation that is. Not I don't know what you could call it to make it more appealing, but, and then there's so many ways that you can get annoyed with patients. Oh, they overdosed again. Or, I don't want to say negative things about patients. Okay, so there's a lot of, ways that people can be critical, but we got to be really careful to uphold these people. Treat them with respect, treat them with love, treat them with compassion. And then are you walking your talk? I know that's kind of a generic thing, but whenever you are there and people are watching you and things get crazy and everyone misses their lunch break, are you the person that's going to complain that we didn't get lunch and that the hospital has crazy demands on us, or are you going to be the one that just buys pizza? Whenever the nurses are having a bad day, are you the one that's going to yell at them to hurry up and go faster and suck it up or at work? Or are you going to put your arm around them, give them a hug, and ask them what's wrong? We definitely need to walk the walk. We need to be generous. Everyone thinks that doctors make a ton of money, and they do okay. We have tons of loans to pay back, but even if that's not the case that we make a ton of money, you still need to be generous and let them know that you care, not just with your words, but with the things that you do. If it's Nurses Week and you're one of the few people that don't pitch in to buy the nurses a present, it's going to get out that, man, those Christians are stingy. Don't be that one. And, also, do you talk the talk, or do you talk your walk? So sometimes it's easy to go to AIA, have your little meetings with your team and pray in your Bible studies, but are you able to share? Are you able to talk your walk out in public? So I just have a couple stories to share with you. This is my hardest patient of all time, and not hard from a medical standpoint, but this is going to be a little medical, so hang in there with me. So this guy came in, his leg had hurt for about 24 hours, came in, it looks totally fine. You push on it, and it feels like Rice Krispies. In medical terms, we think is necrotizing fasciitis, which means there's an anaerobic bacteria tracking up the muscle layers. and it's a deep infection which requires urgent surgery, probably amputation. But they fillet open the muscles so that they can kill the anaerobic bacteria, scrub it out. Usually they have to start just chopping. If it tracks up into your peritoneal cavity or your abdomen, they take all the muscle layers off, and you often have to go back to surgery every 2 hours to be super aggressive, because any bacteria that you don't get is going to continue to progress as quickly as it can. So this guy had necrotizing fasciitis. It turned into Fournier's gangrene, which means it's tracking up pretty rapidly. Got him started on high-dose antibiotics, got the surgeon on board. I opened up the OR within 30 minutes, went in to explain to him what was going on, how we need the urgent surgery, and he says, I'm not going. I'm like, let me explain this again. You're gonna die. 24 hours, 48 hours max, you're gonna die. And he's like, I'm not going. I'm like, can you repeat back to me what I just said? And so he tells me, I'm like, all right, I talked to his family and he makes his own decisions, so he's okay. So walk out of the room, cancel the OR, walk back in, I'm like, dude, we need to have a talk. I'm like, I care about you so much, I'm so worried about you. Do you know where you're going to go when you die? I'm like, it's inevitable, 48 hours max. He's like, no. I was like, okay, do you know about Jesus? He's like, no. I was like, well, can I tell you about Jesus? And he says, no. I'm like, you're gonna die. I need to tell you about Jesus. And he says, no. And I was so confused, and I'm like, I walked out of the room, I'm like, all right, God, what's going on? Have you hardened his heart? Is he already so toxic from the poisons in his body that he's not understanding? Is he whacked out because they gave him morphine and Dilaudid? Or has somebody ruined Jesus for him? What? It could have been a number of these things. I don't think he's whacked out on the meds because he's making his own decisions. He could refuse the surgery. And I go back in and I talk to him. We have this conversation 2 or 3 times. And he would not let me tell him about Jesus on his deathbed, knowing that he was going to die within 48 hours. And I just started thinking, looking back at my life, I'm like, God, who have I ruined Jesus for? Who have I hurt so badly, knowing that I was a Christian and not living the life or walking the walk or talking the talk, that they could potentially go on and not want to ever hear about you ever again? And this isn't a talk about shame or guilt, because we know that God doesn't bring that on. And if you think you mess up Jesus for someone, God can bring somebody else to unmess him up. But you know, if you feel like you've messed up Jesus for someone, you could be that stepping stone to turn them around and to make things right. And I'll never know if he thought about, you know, Jesus when I left that room or not, but I am forever going to be burdened by his soul, and I can see his face to this day, and it really breaks my heart. So I have a couple catchphrases that I use with my patients to kind of get them thinking about Jesus. And we're not supposed to like openly talk about God, but patients can initiate it. I like to kind of get that conversation going. So with my people that have overdosed, and we know them quite well, usually they don't just overdose once, but I'm like, man, you were seconds away from being dead. How in the world are you here again? You are so lucky that you are here. Right now, you could be in your eternal home. Do you know where you're going to spend eternity? And they're usually like puking their guts out because they're in withdrawal, and they're like, I'm going to be in hell. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it, you know? There's also a lot of chronic diseases that we don't have a cure for. People that are on dialysis, people with congestive heart failure, bad diabetes, bad heart disease, kind of a downward spiral. It can take years and years and years, but those diseases aren't reversible. So, you know, I talk to them and say, you know, we never know how long we have here on earth. Have you thought about what comes next? And a lot of little old ladies will hold your hand and say, oh, honey, I'm going to heaven. And that's awesome. And then you can pray with them. And some people don't. And then you can take it a step further. You know, next, another one, people come in having heart attacks. I'm always like, oh man, you are so lucky that God got you here in time. Our cardiologist and the cath lab, cath team, we can open up those arteries within several minutes, 99% chance or better of you having a full recovery. If you have a relationship with God, now is a great time to thank him. And if you don't, now's a good time to start one. And we're usually walking down the hallway because we have to get them to the cath lab in a certain number of minutes. So I usually just pray with them on the way down to the cath lab. So let me just leave you with a verse. Matthew 5:16, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Let me pray with you real quick, and then I'll go ahead and show you some pictures. Dear God, thanks for this opportunity to share the story, Lord, and your redeeming work in my life, Lord, and how you can use us to redeem medicine, redeem the culture that we see every day, Lord, in the different practices and areas where we are. We love you so much. Help us to let your light shine through us, Lord, so that people may see us and want to know more about you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so. Can I show my pictures real quick? All right. So I did get married, and this is my husband. He's the shortest guy I ever dated, the poorest guy I ever dated. His S10 pickup drove like this because there's something in the back that's supposed to push it up that he didn't have. And what else? Oh, I think he's handsome, but Calvin Klein never called him up, so I don't know. These are my two little boys. It's impossible to get a picture with them both smiling and not being goofy at the same time, so we just look ridiculous in all our pictures. This is them again. They like to draw on their face and be silly because that's what little boys do. That's me as a doctor. I'm training at Michelle's gym. I'm Ninja Warrior in training. I also volunteer with a group called Young Life. I volunteer and I'm the area chair for 7 different high schools. These are a bunch of our volunteers at the finish line in the Cap City half marathon in the spring. You know, if you've been hurt, a great way to overcome that hurt is to champion a cause. I had a really bad childhood, in my opinion, and felt really isolated and alone during high school. What these kids do is they go into the high schools and reach the kids furthest from Christ, the kids that need a friend, the kids that are alone and need Jesus. If I would have had that, hard to say, but I think I would have made a whole lot of better decisions. And so we really champion their cause and support this group. So may the force of our Lord Jesus Christ go with you.
Thank you so much. So, we have a few questions that we're going to put up